Ooh, somewhere over the rainbow.
Hello, Sharon. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Mark Silverman? Are you having a good Hanukkah?
So far, I've given stuff and haven't gotten anything, but that's because my wife
mailed your card out. I mailed your card out yesterday.
I'll get it for New Year's. I wasn't talking about you. I have given my wife and daughter something every night so far, 2 nights. They're not up on the tradition.
The gift is giving, right? The gift is giving.
This is true. Sure, let's go with that.
Okay.
We've got a rather lengthy list of some very high-profile people.
I tell you, I kind of couldn't get into this week's show because our first honoree it just really blew my mind. And so that would be Stephen Boss, otherwise known as tWitch.
In that line, someone we know very well is drawing a crowd.
My name is Stephen Boss, aka tWitch. I'm 25 years old and I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. Last year I actually auditioned in LA, made it to Vegas. And when it came down to the pickings, there was one slot for a guy left, and it was between Hawk and myself.
tWitch, we are not going to ask you to stay with us.
I'm back this year to try it again, and I'm excited though, because I plan on trying a couple of different things that I've learned since Vegas last year, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully they like it.
tWitch, let me be perfectly honest with you. If you don't make it through Vegas this year, I'm going to kick your ass. Do this! And cue music.
"40 years old, seemed like he had everything in the world going for him. His career was taking off. He had a good marriage. He had 3 children. The oldest, his daughter, was adopted. He adopted his wife's eldest daughter, so he was her father as well. They were talking about having. They were talking about having.
I knew tWitch. I remember tWitch from So You Think You Can Dance.
Right.
And we watched that. I haven't watched it in the last few years, but we watched it pretty regularly for a long time.
Do you know that he tried out 3 times for that show until he was finally cast in the 4th season?
That doesn't surprise me. Well, you know, in the early seasons, they almost made a running gag. They had a couple of people who were trying out who had no chance, but they just showed up for the tryouts every year. There was one guy with like the typical Jewish stage mother who thought he was God's gift, and he was just awful. But tWitch was a real standout. He was a real standout.
A real talent, and just this kind of guy. I tell you, my mind was. The last time my mind was blown like this was Robin Williams. You just don't know what's going on in somebody's head. But yeah, he got into dancing. He was looking at the Michael Jackson Thriller years, and he really loved those, the Thriller video and a couple of other videos. I think I read. What was You're Having My Baby? No, that's not him. What was the one about He's Not My Kid?
Billie Jean.
So he was like so taken with that. He was like, he decided right then and there he wanted to be a dancer.
When he first appeared on So You Think You Can Dance, the connection I made, he reminded me so much of Gene Anthony Ray's character Leroy from Fame. Did you see the movie Fame?
Of course.
And do you remember Leroy? He was the boyfriend of the dancer who he accompanied his girlfriend to the audition, and he ended up getting in and she didn't.
But how does tWitch remind you of that?
Well, the same kind of high personality, and a similar build.
Right. I mean, that's sort of hip hop. Yeah, I don't think that he reminds me of the actor who portrayed him that closely. Twitch is smaller in build than the. I don't know. Remember the name of the actor who played Leroy?
Gene Anthony Ray.
Yeah, I don't. He had quite a tragic life, actually, but we'll get into that another time.
Yeah.
But he just, from that time on, his goal was to be a dancer. He went to high school dancing. He went to community college. Then he went to a university in Orange, California. And like I say, it took 3 times for the audition until he finally got in season 4. I think that was 2008, if I'm correct.
That sounds right.
And then from there, he kept kind of coming back. So
he came back as a judge or a coach, I think, in different seasons.
He came back as an all-star first. Like when they kept getting renewed, like once you'd been on the show, they considered you an all-star. So like when they kept trying to switch up the show to make it fresh, they brought him back and some other dancers as like all-stars to dance with the new contestants. So he came back as that. Then another season he came back with another dancer who I believe was the winner of that season, and they split them up and they sort of chose teams. So they did that. And then after that, he returned as a judge. I think it was 2018 and last year, because there was no show in 2019 and 2020. So he came back in 2018 to be a judge, and then he was recently a judge again in 2022. Of course, we all know that in 2014 he became the DJ for the Ellen DeGeneres show.
We don't all know that. I don't watch Ellen. I never watched Ellen's show, so I didn't know that until he died.
Oh well, I mean, all of the people who watch talk shows, and Ellen was a #1 rated talk show. When her DJ, who was a real DJ, left the show, Twitch came on. They became friends. When he was a contestant, his partner got sick, and she was going to miss their bit, like when they had to perform. So, as a secret, they got Ellen to fill in. She spent the whole week learning the routine, and then Twitch had no idea that Ellen was going to be his fill-in. So during their routine, where there was a door, he was laying on a bed, and she came in through a door, and he had no idea it was going to be Ellen, and she popped in, and they did the dance together, and they became fast friends. And then from there, in 2014, he came on as a guest DJ, and then he just stayed.
I'm supposed to be throwing to a montage right now of some of our favorite celebrity moments, but I'm not going to do that. Over a decade ago, I met someone who changed my life and our show. And I'm talking about you, Twitch. Come here. I love you so much, and it's been an emotional week. And it's just a coincidence that your mom's here. Like we were going to do this, and then you told me your mom's here and your best friend's here, and so I just want to say this show is just what happened just now before we came back from break. We do those little tiny moments when we're singing a song, and you always make me smile and laugh. Anyway, we put a little something together just to say how much we all love you here.
From the Warner Brothers Studios, here she is now, Ellen DeGeneres.
Did you have a good summer? Yeah. I watched a whole lot of TV this summer. One of my favorite shows on television is on during the summer. It's So You Think You Can Dance. I love that show. I used to be a huge fan of So You Think You Can Dance, and I wanted to do a dance. So the producers of So You Think You Can Dance set me up with Twitch. Twitch came over to my house, and he helped me try to copy it. It was like a crash course in getting to know each other and he was so patient with me. That was my initial love for him, was we just bonded over learning to dance together.
Come on.
introduce you today to our guest DJ. It's my favorite dancer, tWitch, everybody. That's a cute little son of a tWitch, I'll tell you that.
So much. And he just from 2014 into the last show, he stayed. He even became a producer of the show after Ellen had some kind of scandal with her producers being accused of inappropriate behavior. They were fired, and tWitch was promoted to producer. He also was an actor. Do you know anything about that?
No, I really haven't tracked tWitch since So You Think You Can Dance.
He had, what dance movies? They were hip-hoppy type movies. Well, he did The Blades of Glory. He did Hairspray, which I actually didn't know. And then he did Stomp the Yard, Homecoming, and then there were 3 or 4 step-up movies, like Step Up and then Step Up 3D and so on and so forth. And then the last one he did was Match Mike 25 or something like that. He also, I didn't know.
Let me ask you a different question.
Yeah.
Obviously, he was suffering. There's a degree to which we should respect somebody's privacy, but isn't there something to be gained by trying to figure out what kind of pain he was in?
Well, that's just the thing. That's just the thing. Nobody. So let me continue, and I'll let you know that there really were no signs to anybody who knew him. So he also appeared on TV in Modern Family, which I didn't watch, and a show called Young and Hungry, which I never heard of. And what I was getting to just now is what you brought up, is that, like I said, he appeared, that he had everything going for him. And I guess the key word there is what you are referring to, is he appeared to have everything going for him. But the people that were closest to him had no idea how tormented that he apparently was.
He really gave to charity. He had the common touch, and they were grateful for his patronage, and they thanked him very much. So my mind was filled with wonder when the evening headlines read, Richard Corey went home last night and put a bullet through his head. But I work in his factory, and I curse the life I'm living, and I curse my poverty, and I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be, oh, I wish that I could be Richard Torrey.
So
as we're doing this podcast, your Zoom background is the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge is it's
actually notorious for jumpers, right?
Very much so, to the point that people cross the Bay Bridge in San Francisco to get to the Golden Gate Bridge in order to jump.
Oh, I didn't know that. It just reminded me. Well, the Brooklyn Bridge has that aura as well, but
not to the same.
I couldn't get the Brooklyn Bridge on here, so I took that one.
And they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars
to prevent it, right?
To put up a suicide barrier.
Right. I was going to say, I would have thought they would have done that already.
Well, it's been going on for 30 years.
Right?
Things don't move quickly here. But it has been shown, for example, that when a suicide attempt has been successfully interrupted, more often than not, that person does not make another attempt.
Right.
So
he certainly was. He planned it out.
Left a note, planned it out. It was intentional.
He took an Uber to a hotel that was very close by his home, and he blew his brains out.
So to what extent do we respect somebody's privacy on his personal demons versus trying to learn something that can help us prevent this
from somebody else? You know, it's an age-old question, isn't it? So what I was reading, one of the articles I read had interviewed his grandfather. His grandfather had spoken to him just the Sunday before, said he was the same happy-go-lucky person he'd always been. No indication that anything was out of the ordinary. He just celebrated, I believe it's his 9th anniversary with his wife, Allison. You know, all kinds of quotes. Allison was quoted as saying he brought light into everyone's lives. Oh, this was his grandfather who said that. He brought light into everyone's lives. All I can say is he was a beautiful person that contributed so much to the world and to everyone he met in a positive way, which is certainly the aura that he had around him when you watched him in an interview, or the way he carried himself on the Ellen show, or really any kind of thing that I'd seen him in. Now.
Okay, so he achieved success. He achieved success as a dancer. He achieved personal success in terms of a successful, high-profile job with Ellen. Now, the Ellen show ended, but one would think that A, he was not hurting financially. And
no,
B,
he already had a show lined up with his wife, some kind of
then
dancing show.
What could can we assume? I know somebody who unfortunately ended his life. I know a couple of people who've made attempts, and while I wouldn't take that route, I could understand the rationale and justification, or the perceived rationale behind the people I know who did make either succeeded or attempted. I wouldn't do it, but I could see where and why they may have done it.
Right.
Are we entitled to probe into the life of somebody like Twitch to try to understand why somebody at such a high profile?
You know what it is? I mean, the thing, yes and no, because it's such a mystery as to why he did this, right?
But
with his grandfather saying that.
Is there a privacy shield that he's entitled to versus is there a greater good to try and learn so we can prevent it?
I think that for the people closest to him, it's important for them to know. As far as the public goes, maybe take from what they learn, not exactly release all of what you're calling those demons, and, put a little, I don't know, spin on it, kind of sum it up, kind of round it out and sum it up to let the public know what they had found out without details.
I mean, so, what if instead of it being some sort of form of depression, what if it turns out that he was involved in some sort of scandal that was going to completely destroy his reputation?
No way.
Well, that's just it. The fact that you're saying no way, if in fact that turns out to be what was behind it, you could understand why he may have.
No, it can't be, because then why don't the people who are closest to him know anything about that? Why would he be the only one to? Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
I'm sorry.
That
I'm not saying that this was what he was involved with. I know somebody who turned out to be deeply involved in pedophilia that nobody would have suspected based on anything about him. Nobody knew until they knew.
I hear you.
No, his loved ones, his wife, his daughters, nobody knew.
Well, you know, in the end, nobody knows, right? This is what I said, that nobody knows what's going on
But
inside
that's what I keep coming back to.
But the thing is that anybody and everybody who knew Stephen all had things to say about how beautiful a person he was, that he contributed so much to the world, that everyone he met, he hit in a positive way. He had a good marriage to fellow dancer Allison Holkel. They had the 3 children. Stephen adopted Allison's oldest daughter from a previous marriage. And I also read that they were talking about having another child. And Allison was quoted as saying, let me see where it is. He was the backbone of our family, the best husband and father, and an inspiration to his fans. I for one, could feel that. And I'm not one to gush over any particular star, so to speak. In some ways, I almost felt better about watching Twitch than I did Ellen. Like I said, he had a show with his wife. He had other projects that were supposed to come up in the future. So he was successful, it appears, again, quote unquote. I'm doing air marks like our listeners can hear me. He was successful, both personal and professional. Now, most of us usually have one or the other, right? You're usually, you know, one side is going well, the other side maybe not, the other side suffers. But it's rare that you have both in balance, and it seems that he did. So, because that we don't know what was going on in his head, if you know somebody that if you're having a feeling that you're alone, that nobody really knows you, like, you know, you have a good appearance on the outside, but you're really having dark thoughts on the inside, I implore any of our listeners to our show that are having dark thoughts to reach out and call the suicide prevention hotline. There are many different suicide lines, but the easiest one that I found, just simply dial 988-SUICIDE.
988 has become the suicide hotline, has become the de facto.
Well, I saw a number of others, but that is like the national number. So I just wanted to get that out there. That's everything I have.
I think if nothing else, the opportunity to promote 988 has value.
Definitely.
Let's move on to a lower profile.
Yeah, you know, the thing that I like. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I do like about our show is that we don't just do celebrities. As we find out about local heroes, we do include them. There was a firefighter in New York. His name was William Billy Moon II, only 47 years old. He fell some 20 feet from an elevated surface here last week during a training exercise. I guess, you know, I hadn't thought that veteran firefighters do training exercises as well.
Well, he was an elite firefighter. He was part of an elite unit. As a matter of fact, not only was he a New York firefighter, he was a volunteer firefighter in his hometown in Long Island.
Right.
In addition to his job. So he was fully committed. And as you said, he fell during the training exercise.
So it just makes you think about people who choose to do this for a living, or even to commit to helping their community by volunteering, that there's a lot that goes into that. The thing also is that I think would make this more personally attached to it is that he continues to save lives because his family donated his organs. I read that every donor can save 8 lives and enhance over 75 more.
That's right. I know, as you mentioned, as a matter of fact, her birthday was yesterday. My wife, Redora, passed 10 years ago, and the nature of her hemorrhage left her organs very much intact, as I would imagine Firefighter Moon, after his fall, most of his organs were, not ravaged by illness, is what it boils down to. And that's actually rather unusual. But between the 2 kidneys, the 2 lungs, the heart, the liver, etc., that directly can save several individual lives. Donating corn,
right?
Donating
Either
cornea,
either saving a life or enhancing. Mm-hmm.
The skin is an extremely valuable organ to be donated, and can enhance and improve many lives. So I know for a fact that Redora saved several lives, including a couple of younger parents. I'm sure that's the case with Firefighter Moon, with William Moon as well. And by the way, not to be morbid or anything, even after she was, harvested, her organs were harvested, we were able to do a full open casket. And the professionals made her look wonderful. So even though organs, skin, etc. is being donated, it does not change the memorial and mourning process. That's not a reason not to give that gift. And make sure your loved ones know that that's important to you. Redora constantly was letting us know.
My sister let me know that she has that on the back of her driver's license.
Right. You can put it on the back of your driver's license, but it's also important to not just rely on that, to let your loved ones know.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a surprise to me that somebody who commits to being a firefighter would go on to continue to do this and save lives in that way. So I'm glad we're able to pay tribute to William Moon II, New York City firefighter.
And again, thank you to him for his service, and to his family for allowing him to share him with us.
Absolutely. That brings us to probably one of the higher profile passings this week, and there's another level of similarity. That would, of course, be Grant Wahl.
I'm going to grab that from you for just a second, because I think you have a lot more to say about him than I do. Mm-hmm. Only 49 years old. He had an aortic aneurysm, and I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up, and it said it is a balloon-like bulge in the aorta, the large artery that carries blood from the heart to the chest. In a rupture, the aneurysm bursts completely, causing bleeding inside the body. So now I know what that is.
That's essentially what killed Princess Diana also.
Okay.
And in both cases, now my wife had a cerebral aneurysm, mm-hmm. where blood vessels in her brain were, picture a hose with a weak spot that balloons out.
Right.
Really,
that's a good analogy, Mark. That's a very good analogy. So pretty
really
much
when it's a major channel, whether it's the aorta or something in the brain, there's very little that can be done once that happens.
It's pretty instantaneous too. Like there's not a whole lot, even if it was like in the hospital, they don't think there would. It happened so instantaneously.
Well, that's what happened with Diana. Diana was actually, she looked great after she was not physically significantly traumatized physically by the accident. She did not show significant bruising and injuries, and was conscious and was talking. And she was in the hospital when it may have been the aorta aneurysm, but she had an aneurysm in the chest. in the hospital.
So from what I understand, he was a longtime college basketball and soccer reporter for Sports Illustrated. The other thing that I read was, I got from what I was reading that he was very passionate about what he did. There's so much more about the culture and the politics of sports, of soccer, and to him it was it was sort of a way of life. It was really an understanding of people and where they come from. He covered soccer for more than 2 decades, including 11 World Cups. He authored several books on the sport, according to his website. And I'm going to hand the rest back to you because I think you know more about this than I do.
The fact is, it got a ton of publicity because the World Cup, which just concluded, he died in the middle of the World Cup, and he certainly in the United States was the most prominent person to cover soccer. So during the World Cup, to have the top personality, non-playing personality die during the World Cup garnered a great deal of attention, not just here in the States, but globally.
Well, isn't soccer, I mean, not here in America, but basically worldwide. Far and away the world's most popular sport. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Far and away. And its growth in America is significant. He also you alluded to some of the politics, the games which of course took place in Qatar in the Mideast. He was detained because he was wearing an LGBTQ positive shirt, and he was not allowed to enter. There were those, because of the sudden nature of his passing, that thought something nefarious or suspicious might have taken place, to the point that his wife, even his brother, made statements to that effect. But autopsy and all the examinations, that his wife has made it very clear he had the aneurysm. The other thing, that in the days before he passed, he was complaining about being under the weather. He missed one day, complaining of something along the lines of bronchitis. My thinking, and I'm no medical expert, I'm obviously a layperson, but I think that whatever he was complaining about was probably completely unrelated to the aneurysm that killed him. That rarely has visible symptoms. So one can have a cold while dying of cancer, for example. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So the fact that he was working around the clock covering the games and was physically wearing himself out, I don't think had a direct connection with the aneurysm that unfortunately ended his life. But again, happening during the World Cup, where he is so widely associated with the sport, it gained a great deal of national attention. In its own way, I'm not sure. He might have brought more attention to the world of soccer in the United States than it was already gaining, just by the nature of his passing. Who knows? I
mean, I know the United States, they got pretty far this year.
They farther than they normally do. I think they made the final 16 or the final 8, the U.S. team. His wife is a doctor. As a matter of fact, she's very prominent on networks like MSNBC. She specializes in infectious diseases, so she's gotten a lot of press over the last few years herself with COVID. And it's kind of strange that they weren't together when he passed. That has to be very strange. But that's
when you have a job that requires you to be on the road, that does happen.
Yeah.
Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's stay in the world of sports. The
Yeah,
world of sports suffered several losses this week.
I'll tell you. We have soccer, basketball, football. We're doing baseball is the next portion of our show. We start off with a player whose name is Curt Simmons. He was 93 years old, considered a Phillies icon. To be honest with you,
that's
I
a great goal, bud.
I never heard of him.
Oh, yeah.
But after reading about him, I thought, how did I never hear of him? Because
imagine being 93 and still being known as a Whiz Kid.
Right? Yeah. So you
The
know
Whiz
what
Kids,
else
the
though?
the Philadelphia Phillies of 1950.
Yeah. But you know what I found really interesting was, they international leagues and whatnot that are very prominent in scouting players these days. It never occurred to me that a baseball player would come from Egypt. That's where he was from. So he played in the major leagues. And he came from Egypt. Yeah. So I never heard of.
He was born in Pennsylvania.
What I heard, what I read, here we go again, was that he came from Egypt. That's what it said. It said he came from Egypt. He might have grown up in Pennsylvania. I think it said he was born in Egypt but grew up in Pennsylvania. That's what I read. So
I'm not seeing that anywhere. I think you might have it mixed up with somebody else.
I don't think so, because I didn't have anything else on my computer.
The game was.
I need to save my articles for you.
Yes,
but anyway,
here's what it is. It was he played a game at Egypt Memorial Park in 1947.
Against who? There's no major leagues out there.
Yes, he played a team of all-star high school players from Lehigh Valley. Played the Philadelphia Phillies at Egypt Memorial Park, June 2nd, 1947.
They did that in the 40s? I didn't think they did that until, how the Yankees went to, where did they go? London?
No. They played in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania.
I understand.
Egypt National Park is the name. Memorial Park is the name of the field in Pennsylvania.
Okay, this is what I get for doing research at 2:00 in the morning. I have that he was a Hall of Fame recipient and that he was one of the greatest pitchers in Phillies history. And when I read his statistics, I thought, how is it that I never heard of him before?
He was one of the, I don't think Curt Simmons is in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I know I read that.
He was in the rotation with the Whiz Kids. Robin Roberts was the other pitcher, main pitcher. He's Hall of Fame.
He was selected. Let's see. All right, let me run down what I have here. You'll correct me if I got it wrong.
He's on the Philadelphia Phillies Wall of Fame.
It says a Hall of Fame recipient. He was one of the greatest pitchers in Phillies history. He enjoyed a 20-year career in the majors, pitching for the Phillies. The article references that he was the last surviving member of the Phillies' 1950 pennant winners known as the Whiz Kids.
Right.
He posted a record of 115-10 with 109 complete games, 18 shutouts, a 3.66 ERA. Well, to me, those are certainly impressive numbers warranting being in the Hall of Fame.
His lifetime, his major league statistics, his one loss was 193 and 183. He's 10 games over 500, earned run average 354, 1,697 strikeouts.
I have, among all Phillies pitchers, he ranks 5th in wins and innings, 1,939 and 2/3.
Okay.
6th in games started, tied for 6th in shutouts and 9th in strikeouts, 1,052. Selected to 3 All-Star teams with the Phillies from 52 to 53 and 1957.
That sounds right. He was one of the highest bonuses he got a $65,000 bonus in the late 40s, so which was one of the highest bonuses at the time. He went on to have additional success after he was released by the Phillies in 1960. He went on to sign with the St. Louis Cardinals as a free agent and won 15 and 18 games. Was on the same pitching staff with Bob Gibson and Ray Sadecki. And I believe lost to the Yankees in the World Series. But he may have won a World Series ring with the Cardinals because they were in quite a few at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Hank Aaron and Stan Musial each called him the toughest pitcher they had ever faced in their career. He had a good career. He was not Hall of Fame. He was. This is interesting. Okay, he was the last player to. He was the last player to formally retire who had played Major League Baseball in the 1940s, not counting Minnie Minoso, who unretired twice, like in his 50s and 60s. So he was the last player from the 40s to play, and died at 93. So that's Curt Simmons. That leads us to somebody who I thought was a much younger person. Tom Browning, another pitcher.
No hitter.
Not just a no hitter. One of 12 perfect games. That's very rare. Like I said, 12. So, and he is a World Series winner as well. He had his moments in the sun. What do you have on him?
That's pretty much what I had. I have, during a 12-year Major League career, he pitched for the Cincinnati Reds from 84 to 94 and the Kansas City Royals in 95. He pitched the 12th perfect game in baseball history on September 16, 1988. Against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and he also won the World Series with the Reds in 1990. He's also the co-author of Tom Browning's Tales from the Reds Dugout. So, like, if you're one of those people that like to read baseball books, I'm actually reading one right now by Derek Jeter.
I heard of him. Didn't he used to play like second base or something?
Okay, let me just read this to you. Simmons was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2020.
Simmons was...
Curt Simmons was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2020.
You sure it was the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, not like the Phillies Hall of Fame or something?
No. It doesn't say that. It just says Simmons was elected to the Hall of Fame in 2020. It doesn't say like the Phillies Hall of Fame. It just says the Hall of Fame, and then it says see career statistics.
193.
Oh, I got that right.
Is not 193 and 83 is not Hall of Fame statistics.
Don't argue with me. I'm just reading what it says. At the time, before the age of 100-mile-per-hour pitchers, they considered that worthy. All right, so we're moving on to basketball, unless you have anything to add.
Curt Simmons, first elected to the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame in 1968, later the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame in 2011. He is not a Hall of Fame.
I'll send it to you. I just looked it up.
Okay.
So I saved it this time. I didn't. I read it right off. Okay. Are we moving on?
Sure.
Okay, so we're moving on to Paul Silas, 79 years old. He was a former NBA player and head coach, known for his defensive prowess. So that leads me to believe he had cat-like moves. As a college player with Creighton, Silas was a 3-time All-American basketball player from 61 to 64 and became one of 5 players in NCAA history to average more than 20 points. And then it goes into 20.5, 20 rebounds, 21.6 joining Bill Russell, Julius Erving, Kermit Washington, and Artis Gilmore. Well, I know who 2 of those people are. I went to St. John's, and I was very with my sorority and our fraternity brothers. We were very rah-rah with the Red Men, who are now called the Red Storm. So I did get into basketball culture for a while. So I know.
Did you notice my Facebook picture from the other night? By the way,
of your brother?
No. You go check out my Facebook picture later. You might like something there.
He was a 3-time NBA champion. In 16 seasons as a player, he won 2 of his NBA championships, while with the Boston Celtics in 74 and 76, and his third with the Seattle Supersonics in 79. He was a 2-time All-Star and a 5-time All-Defensive Player. Are you into basketball, Mark?
I'm not a student of it, but yes, I enjoy watching.
I don't really watch it anymore. Dad, I guess if I was, I would be a Knicks fan because that's what Dad was. Although we got the Nets playing for Brooklyn, so I guess as long as they're New York, I'm happy for them. After retiring as a player, he joined the coaching ranks, becoming the head coach of the then San Diego Clippers. In 1980, he lasted there 3 years. While with the Cavaliers, he was the first head coach of the superstar LeBron James, and he finished with a 387, 488 record and led the Hornets team to the playoffs 3 times, reaching the conference semifinals twice.
It's interesting. He was specifically brought in to coach the Cavaliers in 2003 to be a mentor to LeBron James, yet he was fired midway through that season, which, by the way...
Do you know why he was fired?
No, and the players were not happy, and the team essentially fell out of playoff contention after he was fired. Well, they didn't fall out. They ended the season in a tiebreaker, losing to the New Jersey Nets. He stayed with the sport. He stayed he did ESPN, then went back to coaching with now the Hornets. He was a basketball lifer.
Yeah. So speaking of icons, we have Billie Moore is up next. She was 79 years old. She died from cancer. The type of cancer she had was called multiple myeloma.
Myeloma, yeah.
Again, I just kind of looked that up a little bit. It says it's a cancer of plasma cells that suppresses the body's immune response. That says it all right there in a nutshell, because if you can't fight off whatever your body needs to fight off, that's not good. She was the first head coach of the U.S. Women's Olympic basketball team, the first head coach to lead 2 schools to the national championship in women's basketball, and a member of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame.
She was in the right place, not the right place at the right time, but women's basketball started to really gain some high profile visibility.
Yeah, it was gaining momentum.
She coached players like Nancy Lieberman and Ann Meyer, who
right. I didn't know. I didn't know all of the Nancy Lieberman is synonymous with the called a trailblazer as a head coach, and among a very small group of individuals that laid the foundation or the groundwork for where women's basketball is today. She holds the record for most wins, 296 by a women's head basketball coach in program history. And I have that before becoming a coach for UCLA, she was the head coach for the first women's Olympic basketball team in 1976. That was a biggie, right? Wasn't 76 the one in LA?
Could have been, yeah. It's interesting. She eventually resigned under pressure because she was accused of being verbally abusive to her players. She said, "I don't know if you can push them as hard as you could 10 years ago. There's just a different level of sensitivity." In other words, it sounds like she fell under the stereotype of a sports coach. Almost like a drill instructor,
like a drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Overall, it says she also led Cal State Fullerton to a national title in 1970. And overall, she compiled the collegiate record of 436, 196 for 690 winning percentage. And here's my quote. She credited her father with giving her a love and passion for the game. She told the audience she had hoped her career wouldn't be based on wins and losses, but in the lifelong friends she made on the court.
One of the other losses this year was Mike Leach, who was a football coach.
Right.
And one thing I noticed in his profile frequently that I didn't see anywhere at all in Billie Moore's profile, Mike Leach was referenced as having made $2.5 million one year as a college coach.
Oh yeah, no,
$6 million another year.
That leads right into what went on with Granter. She was in Russia playing for another team because she didn't make enough money playing professional basketball here.
So I don't know what kind of money. I would imagine. I mean, I'm blanking on the name of the woman at Stanford who's very high profile. I'm guessing she gets paid well, but certainly
not the same as a male counterpart.
I still find it amazing that college coaches get millions of dollars a year to coach, which is quite the opposite of the pros, I think.
I am not at all familiar with football other than the kicker. I know if they kick the ball and it goes over the goalpost, yay! But
he started out coaching at BYU in Utah, and he wasn't the head coach, but he was working with the team that had quarterbacks like Mark Wilson, Jim McMahon, and Steve Young, all top. And I think all three of them have Super Bowl winners. I know Steve Young and McMahon did. I think Mark Wilson also won Super Bowls. Leach was also got a law degree. So he wasn't just...
He wasn't a dumb jock.
No, he... and, he had his different controversies.
Do you know anything? So I read that he was innovative in his coaching style, that he had a role in creating the air raid offense, which is celebrated alongside his personality, unlike in any other sport. So, do you know what the air raid offense is?
I don't know specifically.
Okay, so that's what I read about that. And then I read he followed that up with stints at College of the Desert, Iowa, Wesleyan, Valdosta State, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. In 2000, he finally got a chance as the head coach at Texas Tech. He spent 10 seasons with the Red Raiders before he was fired in 2009. And after a couple years away from coaching, he returned to the sidelines at Washington State, where he spent 8 seasons.
One of the things that impressed me about him is he was fined $10,000 for being very critical of some calls that went against his team. And fans started to raise money to pay that fine for him. And instead, he directed that the money, the $5,000 that had been raised to that point, be used to purchase 400 hams to give to families in Lubbock, Texas.
Do you think they would have done that for a female coach?
Yeah, I think so. But I just think it was classy that he would rather pay the fine himself and let rather than let people raise money to pay that $10,000, and he committed it to.
Yeah, these days it would be called the GoFundMe page.
There you go.
Okay, so as we wind up this episode, we have a diner called the Happy Days Diner, and located in Brooklyn Heights, Brooklyn, New York, on the famous Montague Street. Cause of death was COVID-19. Unlike us, there was no booster shot that they could take. But after more than 2 decades in business, they were open for 2 decades, 20 years. It's a 24/7 spot, which was best known for serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner all day.
What I find noteworthy about that.
You know what? Well, the thing is, when you find a diner like that serves good food, you find that they have their regulars, and it's also, like, I remember when I was going to St. John's, my senior year there, there was no stopping, right? I went to work in the morning at the school. Then from there, I went to my internship. I worked in the morning for the psych department. I went into the city to work my internship at ABC. And then on the way home, I would stop at the diner, have something to eat, and go back to school to take classes. So you need places like that.
Right.
You need that place. Right. Well, you need that place that you can go to at 2:00 that is open at 2:00 in the morning. But I think that along with many diners, that this is a type of place that's a dying breed. It used to be the kind of place you depended on being there. Along with the IHOPs and the Howard Johnsons, which I don't know if there are any left of those. I think there's a Howard Johnson in Staten Island. No, it's an IHOP. It's not very good, and it's very expensive. So it's not good, cheap food, So restaurants, and in particular diners, have been having a hard time following the pandemic. I found in the article, it said in the article I was reading, there was an estimate of about 4,500 restaurants around the city that have closed their doors since the onset of the pandemic. This diner, because there was no traffic in what's usually a very business-oriented neighborhood in Brooklyn Heights, because there was no traffic, they couldn't pay their bills. So they settled with the people that owned the building, and they were allowed to stay open till November 30th. And so they are no more. And that's that.
Okay. Anything else?
Here comes your favorite part of this show. What's coming up on our next show, Mark?
Some people from TV died.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Could you tell us?
Next week.
Oh, you don't want to give us?
Oh, we promise next week?
I don't know. You don't want to give any kinds of hints to our listeners?
Nah.
Okay. So, I don't know. Will you be here?
Who knows?
The shadow. But you know what? In the meantime, show your love for those you care for today, because they may not be here tomorrow.
Well, that's another episode of Over the Rainbow.
Judy jumped in front of a subway train. Eddie got slit in the jugular vein. And Eddie, I miss you more than all the others. And I salute you, brother. hung himself from a cell in the tombs. Judy jumped in front of a subway train. Eddie got slit in the jugular vein. And Eddie, I miss you more than all the others.